In this video lecture, we're going to see how to provide external inputs to a Java program using an array and the standard main method interface. Okay, let's get started. In this course, so far we've executed our Java programs exclusively using the JGrasp IDE and pushing a few buttons. But if you've been paying closer attention, in the command window there's a bit of underlying detail going on in the OS. Under the hood, running at the OS command line, running a Java application is really a two-step process. First, we have to compile source code into bytecode. So for example, if we wrote our code in myjavaclass.java, it gets compiled into bytecode in the file myjavaclass.class using the JDK installed operating system process called javac. Next time you compile some code, look for an output similar to this, which is triggered by pressing the compile icon. Here's the compile process javac, and this is the source file it's compiling. Then second, the resulting bytecode file myjavaclass.class gets executed by the JVM using a second installed process called Java. For example, here's some sample program output. But just preceding this, notice what's happening. The process Java is executing the bytecode file command line args.class, though that file name extension isn't showing here. This is triggered by pressing the run icon, and in the middle is the program output, which is usually what we're focused on. Well, it turns out that Java programs themselves might be part of some larger software solution. Maybe our main method itself needs some input data at startup. Maybe we want to pass it in some I/O file names or a config file or something else. Perhaps in the larger scheme of things, our Java program is controlled by some larger outside program. Let's take a look at how to bridge the gap between the outside world and our Java programs. Let's take a closer look at our old friend, the standard main method interface for all Java programs, because this is what provides the means for passing in some runtime parameters. We've seen this interface countless times already, although we've automated its creation by incorporating it into our program template. And by this point, we should be reasonably knowledgeable as to all the parts of this interface. But by way of review, public means that the outside world can see and run this program. Static means that we execute this method in the absence of any individual object instances. Void means that this method returns no values to its caller. And main is simply the required name and starting point for any Java application. It tells the JVM where to start executing our program. Now that we've learned about arrays, we can finally examine this last part of the interface. String bracket bracket args is the input to this main method, and it's an array of string arguments called args. The fact that these are strings is crucial, because strings are generic and can represent any type of fundamental data. Strings themselves, of course, can represent individual pieces of textual data, but they can also convey numerical information. Recall that we can convert a string representation of some number into its numerical equivalent using the various wrapper class methods such as parseInt or parseDouble. So for example, let's say that our input string array args look like this. There are 3 elements in this array, and all of them are strings, as indicated by their enclosing double quotes. The first one appears to be some input file name, but these last 2 are the string representations of some numbers. However, using parseInt, we can convert this one to an int 42, and using parseDouble, we can convert this last one into a double 100.0. So using an args array such as this, we can get any type variable into our program using the main method interface, although we might need to type convert it a bit first. If we want to run a Java program and pass in some command line arguments, there are a couple ways to do that. If we're trying to go old school and run manually from an operating system command line window, we type this: Java myjavaclass arglist, where Java with a lowercase j is the JDK runtime executable, and myjavaclass is the compiled Java bytecode file without the .class extension. I remember when I took my first Java class many years ago in the pre-IDE days. This was how we needed to run all our programs in a DOS command window. But now that we have nicer IDEs such as JGrasp to work with, it's much easier. In JGrasp, we can set the build run arguments checkbox, and a run arguments text box will appear above the editor window. There we can specify an optional space-separated list of arguments, and we can run our programs as usual, either with or without the debugger. The next 2 code examples will show how to do this. Here's an example showing how to simply echo back out the input command line arguments. In this first print statement, notice that args is just our standard interface input argument, and it's an array of strings. So this args.length term is simply the length of that input string array, and we're just printing out that value. In this next print statement, in this conditional expression, we're checking whether there really are any input arguments. And if there are, we print this text header. Then simply loop through that input array and print each element of the array, as we've seen countless times already. So in this bottom window, this is the output from running our program 2 times. The first time, we specify no input arguments, so we get this 0. And this for loop over the inputs does not even execute due to this loop condition becoming I equals 0 less than 0. But when we run the program a second time with these highlighted input arguments, they are echoed out both at the command line and in this for loop output, and our program tells us we have 3 command line arguments. Although when we print these out they are all strings, we know that we can easily convert these last 2 number strings into an int 42 and a double 100.0 using their parse methods for use in any program computations. To see how to run this program with command line arguments, please pause this video and view the short code walkthrough for command line args.java, which you'll find in the usual place. Open up this file in JGrasp so you can follow along, then come back to this video when you are finished. This last example shows how to sum up all the numeric input values while rejecting any text inputs. Inside the program, we initialize a running total and a count of good values. Note that we'll treat the sum and all the numbers as doubles, because we can always add ints to a double thanks to implicit typecasting, but not the other way around. So then we loop over the length of the input argument array using the same array looping pattern as always. For each array element, inside this try-catch structure, we're going to try to convert each element of args to a double using this parse double method, then add it to the sum, as well as increment the count of numbers summed. However, this conversion operation isn't guaranteed to work every time because we might encounter input values such as these, which can't be converted to a double value, in which case a number format exception will be thrown. So this catch block allows us to gracefully intercept those cases without crashing our program, in which case we can take any needed corrective actions, such as dialing back the previous count increment. Notice that up here we got a little ahead of ourselves by incrementing the count first. So down here we need to reverse that in case the conversion didn't work out. I artificially placed this count increment ahead of the conversion operation just to demonstrate something we might use the catch block for. In reality, it would make more sense to increment the count only after a successful type conversion, in which case we can dispense with this count decrement in the catch block, but I did it this way just for purpose of illustration. So when we run this code with these highlighted inputs up here, we echo out the command line arguments down here, and we sum up the numerical values 1, 2, 3, and 5, but reject the text value 4, which correctly gives us this double result of 11.0. To watch this program execute with these and other values, please finish up by viewing the short code walkthrough for command line sum.java, which you'll find in the usual place. Open up this file in JGrasp so you can follow along and try out command line arguments for yourself. Okay, that's it for the topic of passing input data into our programs using command line arguments. This is a useful means of tying Java programs into larger software applications.